Hi, everyone. Welcome to Pivotal Practices. This is our 12th podcast, and I'm really excited. We have Margaret here again. But just in case, if you haven't seen the podcast where we talked about boundaries, you can always go back. It's about 2 episodes before, so it would be the 10th episode. And remember, if you like something, you can hit the like, but you also want to hit subscribe, which will allow you to know when the new videos are released. And so I just want to have you, like the last time, introduce yourself and kind of say your whole background for everybody.
Hi, and I'm so happy to be here. The subject that we're going to be talking about is just really inspiring to me. I had been in clinical practice for, trying my memory here, many years. I'm going to say over 30. I started off in child abuse and neglect and did so many years there. And then I also have done many years of hospice work, 24 actually. And that was really where my heart was. And at the time I was doing hospice work, I was also doing private practice and have since transitioned over to just doing private practice. And I specialize in lots of different disorders, mood disorders. I do a lot of couples work, grief and loss, obviously. And helping people navigate this traumatic world we live in. And so trauma is a big bulk of what my practice is right now. So, and forgiveness, it is so intertwined in all of what I do that I'm so excited to be here because it's such a
Yes.
profound subject that I think often is ill-defined and misaligned with other components. So I'm happy to do some clarification and definition today.
Totally. Yeah. So basically, from our Boundaries podcast, one of my clients came and said, you brought up forgiveness. And we had said, I remember, like, we need to talk
Yes,
more about
yes.
this. But people have asked me to talk more about it and to bring Margaret back on because clearly, even as much as we all learn as we get older, we want a professional to really go into the concrete ways of defining skills and actual behaviors and ways for us to work through forgiveness. But we wanted to define forgiveness. And so I wanted to ask you, how would you define forgiveness for people?
That is a great question because I think my history has been with clients and people in general is that it really is ill-defined. And so I think forgiveness and forgetting often get linked together, which really don't belong together. So let me start by just defining when we talk about forgiveness, what exactly it is. Forgiveness is an internal response. It's what I choose. And I think that's really important because I get to decide how to do it. And I also get to decide that I no longer want the feelings of resentment or anger or trauma to be what links me and keeps me stuck in this cycle of unhappiness. And so, what forgiveness does is I get to decide that I'm going to let go of the hurt and the pain and the brokenness, really, that came from whatever the event was that caused it, or the interaction with whomever that caused me to feel so angry and hurt. And forgiveness in no way, let me say this, and you're going to hear me say this throughout our podcast today, it in no way releases the other person from their wrongdoing. In no way makes what the other person said or did, or the event, for example, it in no way makes it okay. It in no way makes it suddenly legal when it was illegal. It has absolutely nothing to do with the person or the event. It is me. I'm choosing to respond and let go, and that's why I say it's internal, right? I get to stop letting the event and the feelings around it define me, and define the story. I get to rewrite it. So it really is a profound process. And I have to say, it's a process. It's not like we flip a switch and suddenly we've forgiven somebody. It takes time to do that, but I think it's incredibly important. And we'll, as we talk through the podcast, realize that there's both emotional benefits to this, physical benefits, and relationship benefits, really.
Yeah. And we're basically saying you're not advocating for the behavior.
No,
Like you're not
no.
saying it's 100% okay. And I think sometimes that is one of the reasons why people don't want to forgive in their mind or in their heart is, but it's not okay and it's not fair.
Right,
But
right.
I don't think people know that forgiveness has nothing to do with saying that
Nothing.
I'm advocating that that was okay. It's actually the complete opposite.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because that's where I say forgiveness is linked together with unhealthy things like forgive and forget or forgiveness and reconciliation. And when you can shift your thinking from this being about somebody else to really being about me, then my motivation and my understanding shifts. And I don't have to be held hostage anymore to this event that profoundly affected me in a negative way. It's about you releasing that anger so you feel better.
Yeah, I really like what you're saying because I think that sometimes people get confused around this subject. And that's why it's also such, I mean, it's one throughout our lives that we really have to practice throughout
Yes.
our entire lives until we're gone. Like there's, if you want to be set free and you want to truly be healthy, it's something that you want to advocate for and almost becomes a policy within you after you realize how beneficial forgiveness is. Yeah.
Well, and there are levels of benefits to it, right? When we talk about, releasing feelings, suddenly now, when I'm releasing negative feelings or emotion, I make room for joy and happiness and healing, true healing. And it's not easy. I understand that, and we're going to talk about how to do it later on. But recognizing the benefits to me, emotional well-being and stability, right? I would say improve overall mood, less anxiety, less depressiveness, better sleep. I think we are a sleep-deprived culture, and there's many reasons for that. And when we are full of angst, anger, frustration, resentment, any of the above and more, our body never gets to relax and feel at peace. And so if you can imagine the act of forgiving allows me to regain peace in a way that is so profound, it's life-changing.
Yeah, I agree. I really agree. So, I wanted to, and I don't know, and correct me if we want to start with a certain order, but one of the things that we probably should go to next is how does forgiving look like? And like what are the things that somebody can do to actually work through forgiveness?
Sure. I think recognizing that I have been hurt, right? And so there's a book, and I brought it with me actually. It's called The Book of Forgiving. And it's written by Archbishop Desmond Tutu and his daughter. And what they talk about in the book is how do you do this, right? And they define it in the way we have, right? So it's an act, it's a choice to let go of unwanted past hurts, and you can put anything in that bucket, right? From a small hurt to a profound trauma, it's all put in the same bucket. Not meaning that they're the same, but the result of these hurts is the same, right? Anger, resentment, frustration. And so I think the fourfold path that he talks about is you need to be able to tell your story. And telling my story means I have a safe person to do that with, and I can allow myself to be vulnerable in the telling of the story. And whether that's with somebody in your village that you feel close to or it's a professional, you really do need to tell your story, and you have to have a space to do that. And that means that in the telling of the story, I'm trying to make meaning of the trauma. I'm trying to understand what happened to me. And I think part of telling your story means that I have a want to move from revenge, possibly, to forgiveness. And so when you tell your story, you'd be surprised at the feelings that some bubble to the surface, right? And so I think it can be intentional, but oftentimes what shows up is unintentional. It's a way to move from being a victim to feeling like a hero in my own story.
I agree with you. I feel like when you're talking about the way that you're starting to go about it, you we were talking about this earlier. It's important that I have people I can go to. Like, we have to be able to filter through our emotions. This is the way we process things. Even when we write out stuff, we find revelation through journaling. But the one part of this that I think is important is I need to keep it within a certain circle, because if I start going around over talking about it constantly to a ton of people, then I won't know how to let it go. And then I'll almost fuel the wrong thing. But then there's like the golden level of it that is about going to my selected, trusted, whether it's my husband or a couple of my best friends, and really releasing it, because if I don't ever talk about it, then it festers within me.
For sure.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about trauma, whether it was childhood trauma or trauma in my adult world, we don't talk about it. And I think it's very important for people to feel safe in doing that. And that means that I have the courage, really, to say enough. This has hurt me enough. I'm full of toxicity that I need to release it. And I think when you have your village, and I love that word, you have your trusted people to start to do that with. And so telling your story is the beginning of it. And that may take a while, because it's hard to tell the story in full, in entirety, right? It sometimes can be triggering or really overwhelming in so many ways. And that's an understatement. And I can't come up with a word that at the moment that really fully encapsulates the intensity of your story. And so I think it's a process, and you have to allow yourself time to endure the process, knowing that there's healing at the end.
Yes, because, and when you go to somebody, let's say the person that you're talking to is involved in something that you're trying to reach forgiveness in, and I know we'll get into this, but for example, sometimes because it's so much more heated between the two of you and their reaction, because a lot of times when somebody has done something that's maybe violating or hurt you, their first reaction, as we said with boundaries, or when you're setting a boundary, isn't going to be as wonderful as you hope. But then usually sometimes everybody needs time to process. But sometimes you don't get the opportunity to say the entire story, because their reaction is so severe that you actually pull back in, knowing that you can't even go there. And then, to me, those things then eventually leak out later. And then sometimes that person's like, well, that didn't happen, you didn't. And it's like, well, actually, if you had a mirror to see the responsiveness, I couldn't even get that out. Or I clammed up and it was just too much for me to get out at the time,
Well, it does tie back to our original podcast on boundaries and being assertive in the moment, and understanding that the person who's receiving you may not be in a position to do that. And so sometimes I think it's really important to have somebody outside, somebody objective, that's not part of the original story, to be able to tell your story too, so that you gain some purpose and understanding, and maybe a different perspective from the feedback that will help you redefine the story.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Okay.
And then I think we go from telling our story, and this is very different, to identifying my feelings about what occurred. So when you tell your story, it's almost as if you're being rather factual in nature, right? This happened. But when you start to dive deeper, it's about your feelings related. And this is where processing happens. And this is where revelations occur, and awareness is heightened. And part of the feeling portion of this, you can't skip over this. Let me say it this way. You can't skip over the feeling part. And this is truly being able to open up the box to say, here's my story, and now naming the hurt that was a result of my story, is part of what you do when you face the deep pain. And that is so moving. And that's why I said at the beginning, to have the courage to be able to do the process says to the world, I'm ready. And it will take however long you need to take. But the feeling part of naming the hurt and naming the feelings cannot be overstated.
This is so true. So, like, just giving an example, like with my father, and I have never been shy about this, that I came from an abusive childhood. But one of the things that I realized as I was going through yoga training was pinpointing my feelings to what exactly has it caused. And as much as people get scared of their feelings, your feelings are directions for you. It doesn't mean you let them spiral you as if they're, going to rip the carpet from underneath you. You can process them. They're really not something to be scared of. They're something to really pay attention to, be aware of, but also, like you're saying, be conscious, using your brain with your heart. And I remember, and this happens, I've noticed as a theme with a lot of people traumatized, is unworthiness. It's like suddenly, you can come to a phrase or a word that starts to actually be the way to set you free because you faced and defined your feelings and realized exactly what it is you need to work on. Yeah.
And I think recognizing that the feelings as a result of the hurt are yours. You own them. Nobody can tell you they're wrong. Because they're yours. And we talked in the boundaries section when we did that podcast about feelings versus facts. The facts were your story was your story. The feelings is a result of the facts. And you can change your feelings. Facts are unchangeable, right?
Yes.
Your feelings about it. And in the process of forgiving, that's the point, is identifying your feelings so you can heal. And then I get to say, now my feelings are different about this. I am releasing the hurt. And that allows more space for a different perspective of the story. I get to redefine the story and my role in the story from being a victim to being my own hero. And I think when you talk about unworthiness or devaluing, that is a direct result of trauma, most traumas. And so being able to reclaim your feelings is a way to say to the world, I matter.
Yes, and would you agree? I feel like, let's give an example, and I don't make lightly of this when I'm talking about this, but when women are raped or when young kids are sexually abused, unfortunately, because they might not have had many opportunities to be counseled or understand the process, they'll wonder if they did something wrong. And that is sometimes part of what's binding them, or abuse. They start to become rewired in their brain, and then they feel like they deserved it or they have shame. And really, none of that is true.
Well, because part of the forgiving process from trauma is not just forgiving the person that hurt you and identifying those, but often a byproduct is the need to self-forgive, which is huge. And as kids, I say this in a funny way, but it's true. Like, we don't get choices. The families we're born into, right?
Yeah.
And so whatever we get from our families of origin, the good, the bad, and the beautiful and the ugly, we take that into our adulthood. And then as we become more mature, we get to decide, okay, what about this is unhealthy, toxic, unwanted that I want to leave and take the goodness with me. And so part of letting it go is the trauma that we experienced as a child in a home that we didn't have a choice about. And so shame and guilt, I think, are common, I would say almost always, but I don't speak in absolutes, a byproduct of trauma. So as you're working through the forgiveness part of naming the hurt is about what occurred to me, but then there is the byproduct of how I feel about me as a result of that. So it's not just about the feelings about the perpetrator or the event that caused the hurt. It's my own distortion and my owning of something that's not mine to own.
This is a very good point, because it's true. It's
Very
something
true.
that happens as a byproduct. And, we can say, I think I've always told my clients, it's not that you deserved anything. Like, I didn't deserve certain things that happened when I was growing up, and none of us deserve to be traumatized, raped, abused. But on the flip side of that, we still are the ones who have to actually work through it.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter, I'm not trying to say this badly, but to work through it, it doesn't matter whether it's fair or not. The only way I'm going to be set free is just accepting what happened and doing the work to get to the other side. But that, again, doesn't mean that I'm okay with what happened. It doesn't mean that I thought it was fair. But where we can get locked up is just going, but it wasn't fair, but whatever. And it's like, that doesn't matter. Like for me to become healthy, I need to acknowledge it, but it happened. And there's no way
Yes.
I can take that back from happening now.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think part of what delays healing is that people get stuck there. That's it. We get stuck in this circular conversation in our brain about, I can't forgive because if I forgive, then it makes what happened to me okay. That somehow I was in the wrong and that I caused it, when none of that is true. Part of healing and recovery is understanding that life isn't fair, and I don't mean that to sound as cliche as that just did, but again, as a kid, you didn't have a choice. You were in a family that wasn't functioning well, and so whatever you gained from that, good and bad, as an adult, now we have to process that.
Yes.
Because the problem in getting stuck in that looping thinking is a byproduct of that looping thinking is unhealthy relationships, codependency,
100%.
unhealthy boundaries.
Yes.
We talked a lot about boundaries last time, and this is one of the major, I would say, contributing factors to unhealthy boundaries is all of this unresolved trauma and hurt that we carry into our adulthood, or we experience in our adulthood, that we choose to carry further. It's a heavy burden to carry. It's weighted. It distorts my way of thinking, both about myself and about future relationships, interpersonal relationships, work relationships, sibling family relationships. It's all the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll let you go back to the steps you were talking about with the book. Yeah.
So as we identify feelings and start to release them, now we move into how do you grant forgiveness? And it's about, when we talk about letting go of feelings, we're not emotional switches where we decide, okay, I want to let it go, and therefore I let it go. It's a process of understanding the impact of those feelings and the consequences and benefits, we'll talk about that in a moment, of whatever happened to me. And so as I can shift from the terribleness of the event or events to the beauty of the events, again, there's beauty that comes from trauma and can only come from trauma. Not that I ever want a client or anybody to experience trauma, but if you've experienced it, we need to get to a point of understanding, what have I gained and learned as a whole being now, as I'm putting myself back together? What does the whole of me look like as a result of letting go of this? And so it's a process and an understanding that I am worthy of forgiveness, right? I now am reclaiming my being, not the old version of me, but the new version as a result of the trauma, which is a stronger, more whole, more grounded individual. And so as I can view myself that way, the natural consequence or benefit of that is I'm suddenly no longer angry, and I'm suddenly no longer resentful of whatever it is that occurred. And so as I process through feelings, I get to a point where I feel more at peace with myself, because that's the self-forgiveness piece, right? And I feel more at peace with what occurred. And so at that point of understanding, and I would say evolution really, we get to say, I forgive you. And when you do that, you release it with love. I don't release it with revenge, with ill will on that person. I don't wish that upon anybody. I release it with the understanding that I am whole and well now. And that is how we grant forgiveness.
Yeah. So touching base on that, we could include things like if somebody hits you in a car accident, we could include a doctor accidentally messing up in surgery, right? We can include so many examples of where forgiveness is needed. But like you're saying, I learned so much from my back fracture. I learned so much through even getting divorced, right? Like anything that we face, we have the opportunity to grow and learn. And I have honestly learned that through pain, as much as it can be, we were saying this like the last podcast, like you're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to, in life, you're going to be
Yes,
uncomfortable. You
yes,
need to be uncomfortable sometimes. Working through forgiveness is uncomfortable
yes.
sometimes. And growing is uncomfortable sometimes. But out of like some of the worst things that you face, the biggest resiliency, the most beauty, the emotional maturity that happens, the growth that happens is really amazing.
Amazing.
And we learn compassion for other people. We learn how to actually relate to each other due to our pain as well. And to see other people for also the vulnerableness that we really have as being human beings.
Yes.
And I feel like that part of it, like all of my traumas at times, let's say if they were bodily ones, helped me become a more proficient therapist to help people. And I hit a point where I'm like, you know what? You have to admit to yourself that when things happen, unfortunately, the only way through them is through them.
Yes.
There's no way. You can't just sink yourself and sink in quicksand.
Yes.
You have to accept that like moving forward in life and resiliency is moving forward. But this is why I love that verse when it's like God exchanges beauty for ashes, which is so true. But there's a piece of us that has to like co-labor and do our part.
It's almost like through granting forgiveness, we realize we have a shared humanity. And I give the example of a child that's born into an alcoholic home, right? Dad is the alcoholic, and through his alcoholism, there's lots of abuse and neglect that occurs, right? And so in that story, I use the example when the door slams, and I'm living in this alcoholic home. If the door slams hard, I run. If the door slams quietly or doesn't slam at all, it just quietly closes, I approach Dad. I love Dad. I want to know how Dad's day was. If it's sort of in between, I'm hanging out at the edge of the room, assessing, looking, understanding verbal and nonverbal cues, and then I make my decision as a result. And that skill and gift is called emotional intelligence. You walk into a room as a successful business person and you can read the room in a way that is so profound and remarkable that you could not have been able to have that skill without the experience of living in an alcoholic home.
Totally.
And again, I never want anybody to experience that. But when we're talking about granting forgiveness, I'm looking at what did I gain in a beautiful, positive way as a result of this. The negative part, the hurt, starts to fade away into the background. And then what shows up is the benefit of that experience, as you describe, right? Your body work. Without it, you couldn't be, and I will say, the most wonderful person in the world in so many ways because of your trauma. And if we can grant forgiveness through this shared humanity and understand empathy, the gifts then become so wonderful. We can embrace them in such a different way that allows us to grow. And you are spot on. We grow from uncomfortability, and honestly, in no other way. If things are mediocre and not so bad, we kind of hang out in the mediocre state. It's only until we feel bad enough doing whatever it is we're doing that we decide, I matter more than the anger and resentment that I'm holding on to. And so with that comes these beautiful gifts, the gift of understanding and empathy and humanity and humility is pretty wonderful.
It is. Yeah. I feel very blessed over the years, and I don't know if people realize this too, with yoga training or meditation training, or even like we were talking about earlier, going to a counselor. This is why I always say to people, if it's something that you need, and you've never done it, it's worth it. But understand, in all reality, counseling, it's funny, you might go to counseling and think, I'm going to go to complain about everybody. And then really what happens is the counselor's going to teach you tools about how you can actually deal with life and how you can let go. And really it's about you working out life within yourself, because you can't control other people.
Exactly.
And so it's a beautiful thing, but it's a rinsing. And then you completely change your ability to see or to effectively communicate, but also to forgive, to not hold on to things, to realize where you got stuck,
Yes.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about getting to a level of being unstuck, I like that word, we understand now that I need to make a choice. Do I release the relationship? So let me recap. So you name the hurt. I'm sorry. You tell your story. Then you name your hurt and the feelings, both good and bad. You grant forgiveness through the process of releasing and understanding the connectedness we all share. And now it's to a point where we have to decide, and this is the conscious choice of forgiving, why it's different than reconciling. So again, we said at the beginning that forgiveness is an internal thing. I decide to do it. Reconciliation or renewing a relationship is an external response. Two very independent processes, one that are not linked together. And I think when we link forgiveness with forgetting or we link forgiveness with reconciliation, it gets people stuck. Because sometimes it's not safe to reconcile or to renew the relationship. And so when you are deciding, do I release the relationship or do I renew it? If the idea is releasing, and sometimes there is not the possibility of renewing or reconciling. And the example simply is the person that hurt me is no longer living. But yet, again, the event occurred 30 years ago. They're long and they're gone, and I'm still carrying all of this, right? So when you hit the forgiveness phase of this process and you decide, I need to release the relationship, in some ways you have to. You don't know your accuser, the person is deceased, or the person still is the person that abused you or hurt you. And if there isn't change on the other person's end, renewing that relationship would cause you further harm. And that's a hard choice because sometimes the person that hurt us is a member of our immediate family, or there's somebody who once held a really close place in my heart. And I realized through the process of awakening, which is what really this is, that I can't renew the relationship or I can't reconcile. And when you're making that decision from a place of peace and love, awareness is overriding the feeling. So I'm in a more mindful space to make that decision rather than an emotional space. And if we're not truly in a place to forgive, emotions are driving those decisions, right? Which generally don't go well. The emotion can drive me to reconnect with a person well before it is needed or expected or necessary. And then the trauma starts all over again, right? Or it could be that I just decide I don't want a relationship with you ever again, and the disconnect happens abruptly. And now there's another layer of hurt as a result of that decision. And so the decision to release or renew or reconcile has to be from a place of mindfulness and a place of peace. Otherwise, the decisions we make in that state of mind will not necessarily be good for us.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Totally. You know, we've talked a lot about, because not just me, but, you know, I have clients, or we all know people that we love, friends, family, who have family members that are toxic or a spouse that is toxic. And there's a fine line. You know, one of the things that's very true is, for any relationship, our friends, our parents, our spouse, forgiveness needs to be a part of a long-term relationship. And you're going to have more opportunities to forgive those people in your long-term relationships over and over again, because that's normal.
Yes.
But we're not talking about that they're constantly abusing me type of forgiveness, because that's a different level. That's the kind of thing where it's like, well, then I really do need to probably get away from the relationship, because that's a whole other level of understanding that there are consequences that's going to continue to happen to me or my kids, right, or whoever's around me that are negative. But we're not perfect beings, and we're going to make mistakes, and we have some scars from previous relationships that we have the opportunity to work through when we get into a new relationship, and to have breakthrough and to find deeper love and vulnerability. And sometimes it's not just through shared experiences and good times that we get close. We get close through being vulnerable, sharing our vulnerabilities from our past with our partner or the people that we're talking with, what our triggers might have been and why this affected me this way. And when we're seen and heard, you know, instead of taking it in an offensive way, we actually do draw closer. And I think sometimes, you know, there's a difference between bringing up the same issue over and over again, because they have to be resolved correctly for things to really be, you know, feel resolved on both ends. But also a closeness where I can come to you, and for an example, we're still talking about a subject that's similar, and I bring an example from this because those are the only examples I have previously in our relationship to talk about something. And I'm not actually bringing it in to throw it at you anymore. I'm actually like bringing it in because we've worked through this, and that's how close we are now. And I actually feel like we can talk at this level the way I could to a best friend, right? And so that's what I feel like is important for me to bring up about what you're saying.
When we're in an ongoing relationship and we are committed in the relationship, there will be hurts along the way. Going back to our original podcast, how do I communicate my feelings in a way that is direct, honest, and respectful? How do I do that where my words and the way I'm giving it to you matches? If we are to manage ongoing hurts, which will happen, you're right, life's messy, things happen, intentionally or unintentionally. But if you're not being clear with me about the impact of my behavior on you in an ongoing way, I don't know. And so those little hurts, I often say, like this pile of unresolved stuff gets so big and heavy that it just takes a little pin to hit it, to have things sort of blow up in a way where now we're not being kind to one another. And that's from those unresolved hurts, right? And if we don't have the skills to do it, or the awareness or the words, we fumble. And the beauty of being able to work on communication and healthy boundaries means I'm choosing to not allow hurts anymore to define me. If I'm offended or hurt in some way by somebody, and I'm aware of it, maybe not in the moment because we're emotional beings, but later on, it is my obligation to you as my loved one, as a person in my life I care for, to address it in an ongoing way. I really can't say that loud enough. But I think what tends to happen is we just shift things over and we don't address it in a timely way. And then the hurts intensify as the numbers go up. And then our reaction isn't good. And it can often disconnect the relationship in a way that is not repairable, because somebody's hurt runs so deep. But again, I go back to tell your story, which is communicate with my person who's hurt me in a vulnerable way, and name my hurt, and talk about the impact of their words or behavior on me. And then we move into how do we let it go. But we can't just let it go because we say, okay, forget about it, we won't talk about it, I let it go. I don't believe that's true in most cases. I believe we want to let it go. The intention is to let it go. But the way, we don't give ourselves enough time to process through it to truly let it go. Now, our partner may not want to talk about it as often maybe as is needed if we're moving forward in a forgiving way. It's not about dumping on my partner, right? Blah, 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 and dump, just to get rid of my stuff and put it on somebody else. So I walk away feeling free and light. You walk away feeling heavy, disrespected, and terrible. That's dumping. Venting means I have some hurts I need to share with you, and I need a perspective, and I need some feedback. So in order for me to understand your behavior, I need to be in a place to receive it. Venting means I'm here, and as I tell my story, my emotions are now involved, and I'm getting to a more even place where I want to receive your explanation. I welcome your feedback. That's different than dumping. Dumping means I just want to dump it and leave. And as I'm dumping, I'm not doing it in a kind, loving way. It's meant to hurt. It's meant to overwhelm. In some ways, it can be manipulative.
Yeah.
And venting is not that way. And is that clear about what the point of both of those?
I do, and I think people, unfortunately, when they don't have enough experience, and you see it in the world with couples, all of a sudden my spouse is my enemy. And I sometimes have, or, like somebody that I love that hurt me, they're my enemy. And it's like, you need to correct your ego mind and understand that just because this might have happened, if it's not, again, if we're not talking about abuse or something that's like on a level that's different, we're talking about just we make mistakes, we hurt each other's feelings, or this person hurt my feelings. I need to not just run that through my mind a billion times and then that's my whole storyline with my whole relationship and that partner. I sometimes think that then we start to go into I'm the victim, I'm this is what happened to me, instead of going, God has always, I feel like, talked to me like, go back to all the things this person has done for you. Do you see how much your husband loves you? Do you see how much this person has done for you? This is just a moment. It's like we have to correct the ego mind sometimes from running with it in such a negative context that we literally throw up and forget everything else that's been valuable. And that is really dangerous to a relationship. When I'm only coming from the context of you hurt me and that's all I ever remember.
Because as a result of that, what happens? We lose connection with the person that we want to be the most connected with. And when I say connected, I mean emotionally, spiritually, physically, all senses of the word, connected. And it's really hard if we're not being clear about what hurt me. The person on the other end doesn't know and understand this sort of reaction that seems so intense and judgmental, guilty, shaming, whatever accompanies it. If I'm not being honest and open, and that means assertive, not aggressive, in telling my hurt, telling my story and sharing my hurt, then it's not going to be received well. I'm not responsible for how it's received, but I am responsible for how I give you the message. And we talked about this with boundaries. Being clear and direct and honest is what my responsibility is to the ongoing health of this relationship. And if I'm recoiling and I'm not sharing and I'm disengaging, where now I'm acting my hurt rather than telling my hurt, the relationship will not last. And I think when we come from an unforgiving place, a byproduct of that is more isolation, more withdrawn in the world and in relationships in general. And I think when we're in an ongoing relationship with somebody that we care about, we want to do the opposite. We want the hurt to pull us together, as you had shared, rather than isolate us and disconnect. But yet, when we don't communicate well, it doesn't just affect my emotional well-being in the relationship, but I'm now in conflict with my spiritual beliefs as well. And that is pervasive in all that I do.
Yeah.
And it's really challenging.
So one of the things that's really important, I think, for us to talk about, because I do know the person who asked me about this podcast, and so I can be more specific in a confidential way, and totally can relate, is having a parent who is emotionally abusive and verbally abusive throughout your entire life, and yet what does that mean? Let's say whether it is that they're aging and you're aging, like, I can explain to people you need to have sound boundaries. If you're choosing to keep that relationship, it needs to be very only in certain windows so much time, so that you aren't bombarded, so that you're able to stay healthy. But I guess I would guess one of their biggest questions is, how do I forgive somebody who's actually a parent, who's supposed to unconditionally love me, who has verbally and emotionally abused me my entire life? And when is it best for me? How do I know the signs of when it's best for me to remove myself from that relationship and understand that my siblings are probably not going to understand, or people that I love might even turn against me because I'm doing what's healthy for me.
Well, because I think the part with your siblings not understanding is that no matter how many siblings or children are in the family, everybody has a different view and a different experience. So I would say, first and foremost, honor your experience and understand that it was real and it wasn't okay. And I think when we talk about shared humanity, and this is the child abuse neglect part of my history that I can pull from, in doing that work, I realized that any parent under the right circumstance and the right stressors can hurt their child unintentionally. And I don't think it's rarely intentional from the perspective that I want to hurt my child. I think there are different reasons people abuse people, not that there are any okay reasons. But I think as an adult now, I need to look back and say, my parents did the best they could with what they had. It in no way makes it okay. It in no way makes it accepting or that they would get Parent of the Year, but they did the best they could with whatever they had, whatever the tools were. But now as an adult, trying to reestablish that relationship, for example, if they're not doing well, and it requires some hands-on care, for example, for me to be involved, I would say be very clear what your boundaries are with that. What are you willing to do? How are you willing to do it? So if I'm willing to help, for example, with taking care of them for 4 hours on a Saturday, and at hour 2 it starts to get terrible, I have to have a backup plan to that, right? No one should ever be in a position where they are re-traumatized all over again. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes our parents, if they're not growing and getting well in the process of aging, well emotionally, where we can have an understanding and a conversation about what occurred as a child. If they're not in a place to receive that and they are still unhealthy, remember we talked about there's reasons why relationships it's not recommended to reconcile. But I have to understand that sometimes if they are as abusive as they were as a child and I re-enter that situation, I am putting myself at risk again. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to say I can't do this. It is almost necessary to say I can't do this. I can't be in it and doing the care. Can I make some phone calls on their behalf? That may be the way I help. I might do grocery shopping for them in a way that keeps me at an emotional and physical distance from the person that hurt me, so I'm not re-traumatized again.
Yes, I don't think it's okay for us to think, and I know I brought this up last time, and again, when we talk about anything as far as spirituality, you take what works for you. This is never about judgment. It's just speaking from your own experiences and what you feel possibly spiritually. But it's okay to forgive. But I feel like sometimes we're guilted as people who might follow Christ, as in we're supposed to be a doormat, and that's really not in God's word. And I think sometimes religiously that is taught from God's word, and that is man teaching that. That is not what God intended, because God doesn't want us to be abused. God's not okay with condoning abuse. God knows how much it hurts us. In fact, it makes, I'm sure, the Holy Spirit cringe when the Holy Spirit sees human beings abusing other human beings and talking to each other a certain way. And I think that that's where there has to be this, I need to not feel the guilt that was taught to me religiously or by what was shoved into my head by the abuser, even religiously. My dad was religious and used it to abuse us and to, manipulate us. And we have to come to the part of this just isn't beneficial. If every time I'm leaving this place, my body is showing me symptoms or horrible things are starting to surface for me or I'm spiraling, these are like huge signs that this is not good for me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think part of the recovery, whether we renew the relationship or we let it go, when we're talking about renewing or reconciling, there's an accountability on both people's end. If I'm going to reconcile with you and you're my parent that's been abusive to me, there has to be a level of understanding that this won't occur again ever. And the person who has hurt me has some responsibility. You take accountability for what you did, whether it was intended or not is not the point, right? And so if the person that you're wanting to reconcile with assumes responsibility, we can move forward. But saying I'm sorry for what I did requires, and I can't say this loud enough, change. It means I'm not going to treat you in that same way again. And if that occurs, then the words and behavior aren't matching, right? This is the back to the boundary section or the podcast we did. You got to believe the behavior. And so if you try to reconcile and it's not healthy, you're not feeling respected or honored, then it's not going to, the timing of it is not right. And there is no reason for guilt to drive that, because I feel so guilty, I need to be there and I need to engage again. I often say when emotion drives the decision-making train, it will derail. Again, it needs to be a mindful choice and a thoughtful choice to re-engage. So because somebody is sick in their old age doesn't mean I need to jump in and start to take care of somebody. It means if I'm committed to the process, I can do it in a different way that protects me.
Yeah.
So it's not a binary choice, right? It's not black or white.
Yeah.
But if the person that you're trying to reconcile with is not at a level of acceptance of what you're saying their behavior caused in you, that they're not willing to hear it or accept responsibility for it and say, I'm sorry, and change, then it isn't possible. And I don't say that it's never possible, because I do this work because I believe anybody along this age span or life continuum can change if they want to. Mm-hmm. So I don't think that it has to be an all or nothing at a certain time. It can be a gradual process, and it often is. It's not a switch, right? Mm-hmm. So, but if the person isn't willing to talk with you openly and honestly and honor your feelings and honor your story, then it really isn't time to reconcile.
Yeah.
And if I push it because guilt or shame is driving it, I will be re-traumatized and re-hurt all over again. And I don't think anybody intended it. Nobody intends that.
Yeah. I agree with you. So what can we bring up as far as the physiological or the body things that happen as a side effect of us forgiving?
Yeah, so when we talk about being in an unforgiveness state, right, we talked about carrying anger and resentment and frustration. We know over time, and there's all kinds of studies out of the National Institute of Mental Health and the Mayo Clinic that talk about what is the physical brain-body connection of being in an unforgiving place. And things like chronic illnesses, right? Our immune system is in overdrive for years, and it's not designed to do that. And so when that happens, our body just breaks. Our body is not a machine. I often say, like, if our head had its way, it would run our body into a hole, right? Our head wants to go, 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 right? But our body at some point just stops you in your tracks. You get sick, and you have to stop. And so immune system diseases happen. I would say autoimmune diseases. Mm-hmm. You look at cardiac health, because this is a huge determinant in cardiac health. High blood pressures, arrhythmias, high blood sugars, which affects my whole system, right? Every organ in my body is affected by diabetes and high blood sugars. We talk about migraines, TMJ, stressors that our head carries as well as our body. And the reality is our gut is a checkpoint, right? Our gut, I love our gut. Our gut will tell us when things are going sideways. Mm-hmm. So when we are in an unforgiving state and we're full of so much resentment, our GI system goes haywire. And if you looked at the GI system, like from from the beginning of where it starts, all these nerves run along our GI tract more than any other place in our body. And so when something is off, our body GI system will respond. Mm-hmm. So there's all kinds of terrible GI diseases that can be directly affected by our stress level. Mm-hmm. And those are really terrible diseases that I wouldn't want anybody to endure. And so what you find is as you start to go through the forgiveness process and start to work on the emotional state that drives our body heals. Mm-hmm. It heals.
So when I had just faced what I had faced, there was healing from trauma that definitely came forward, which I teach people on this. I've done my own work, but this was healing from this portion of my life later in life, what had occurred. And I think that people have to realize that at times in our life, there will be healing periods. That when our body does something that's off, It's time for a healing period. Our body's telling us that. We can't just keep going through life like you're saying. When our mind keeps telling us to go, our body will stop us.
Yes.
And
Yes.
we have to accept that throughout our lives, there are times where we need a healing period. Those things will reform us back to full, homeostasis. And not only is that needed, that's imperative for us to even keep going. As much as we're resilient, we are also sensitive. We are also still biological people, right, that have needs and things we have to fuel our body with. And I think, too, adding to that, low back pain is a huge indicator of stress, deep personal stress. I usually tell people that's one of the first indicators that your body's trying to say something, along with like all the things that you're mentioning. And then we can talk about cortisol washing over the
Yes.
brain constantly, which is not good for us at all or for our entire body. Yeah.
When that happens, it's like our body is in a fight, flight, freeze mode, in a more chronic state, and our body was never designed for that. Fight, flight, freeze is when I'm in an acute situation where I'm being attacked and I need to decide what to do: fight, flight, or freeze. It's not meant, and cortisol releases and we go, right? Whatever it is we do, and it's not meant to be that way. And I think the other part that ties into what you're saying, Teresa, is, our body needs peace and rest and healing. And when we are full of emotional distress, we don't sleep well. We have difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, or what I would say is you're in bed for 8 hours, theoretically sleeping, but you wake up feeling unrested. That is another sleep disorder. When our body doesn't have sleep over time, it will just break. And I think we are a sleep-deprived society where we think we can function on 4 to 5, 6 hours of sleep. And you may be able to do that episodically. And God knows there's all reasons why. If you're taking care of a child or, a sick parent or whatever is happening, or you're in a job where your shift is days and then nights, some things we can't control, our bodies will accommodate, but at some point it needs to get back to homeostasis in order to continue to live in a healthy way. You will sustain, but not be healthy emotionally, physically, and spiritually.
Yeah, we're not stuck in anything. Whether we want to admit that truth or not, you are not stuck in anything.
No.
You are the advocator to getting unstuck on all the things. This includes you being so frustrated over some job or person in your life that you are allowing that to rule your body and your circumstances, which is still a choice, unfortunately. And I say that in the kindest way. We have to understand that health is us advocating, like me and Laura talked about in the podcast before. Self-advocating is my responsibility for my mental, emotional, and physical health. It's not anybody else's responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, and you described, if I don't do that, I'm really being held hostage to the event or to the person that caused me harm. And nobody needs to be held hostage. I get to choose to do it differently. And you are spot on. It is a choice. And I know that may go against our teachings, right? That it's only when that person that hurt me is willing to forgive, is willing to accept forgiveness, is it doable. I'm going to say this in a profound way, and I would say to the audience, don't shoot the messenger, is that there is nothing in this world that is unforgivable. And there is no one that is unforgivable. And I say that because it's not about them, it's about me.
Yes. I have completely forgiven my father. And I know I have. It doesn't mean I don't have emotions that rise up because there's been a lot of pain. But I don't know, for me, working through forgiveness with so many things is so important. Like when people say, well, blah, 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 I hate, I'm like, hate doesn't exist in my vocabulary because hate is a killer of the inside of you. You might not like their actions, but the thing that people have to realize is these people who are abusing or doing things, they've been abused. They've been hurt. there's also sometimes a source of evil, you know what I mean, that is also linked to certain things, when people are doing murder or raping. And you have to understand that to me, the best thing we can do is not only forgive, that sets me free, but I need to pray for them, And when I forgive, I allow the Holy Spirit the opportunity to honestly go after that person instead of meeting evil with evil, which is not going to fuel good energy. When I pray and I release it and I keep praying for them, I allow God to move more into their lives for change to be created, which is the most powerful thing I can do,
Which is why I say that there really is nothing and no one that is unworthy of forgiveness. Because when and it goes back to myself, I often put myself in that bucket of being unworthy of my own forgiveness. And when you are able to look at yourself as a beautiful, strong, competent, worthy human being, and that there's beauty in you and around you, the forgiveness piece for me is so profound and moving that I move into a different emotional space in my life. The benefits that come from that, it's not just about a physical healing, but when we talk about emotional and spiritual healing, I suddenly have so many things to be grateful for and to be joyful about. The weight of unforgiveness, it's heavy. It's a heavy burden. And it is painful for me to see people carry that and feeling justified in carrying it because this person is a blah, 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 right? Or this person is so mean that what they did is unforgivable. When we are in that headspace, we are turning our power over to them. They are controlling my physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being, hands down, and there's no wiggle room here. I may think because anger is a intense emotion that it's driving me and it's energy filled, right? But sadness, loss, forgiveness can be viewed as a weakness when nothing could be further from the truth. Anger and resentment is actually such a negative byproduct that it will hurt us and kill us from the inside out. And I don't know anybody that would view that as being strong.
Yeah.
Right? Forgiveness means I am taking control. I am going to now define myself post-trauma. I get to decide and redefine my story now. And that's powerful, right? That's not weak, that's strong. It takes strength, every ounce of strength sometimes, to get through each day to be able to get to a place of forgiveness. That it takes tenacity, commitment, and strength to get there. And that matters.
100%. It takes strength to make boundaries. It takes strength to be vulnerable with people and come forward with things. You're right. It takes strength to forgive. And like in my mind, I picture unforgiveness and anger and all these things as like you taking on this massive weight that weighs on you and makes you become, unfortunately, not just a victim, but it also becomes selfishness after a while. Right. And I don't know if people always view selfishness in all the forms that like you can see it as, but if I want to continue to hold on to this stuff, then I'm being selfish in the victimhood. Being a victim is never going to set me free.
Never.
When I have the strength of like moving through these things, I take all of my power back.
All of it.
And that is amazing. I love watching people take their power back.
Because really, it's the only way to regain peace. If I am stuck in that looping thought of this person doesn't deserve my forgiveness or whatever the intrusive thoughts are, if I stay in that place, it's relentless.
Yeah, it is.
And it's overwhelming, and it distorts my view then of the world. It distorts my view of relationships.
100%.
I'm very rigid in my judgment of people.
Yeah.
And suddenly what I feel, I'm now projecting on everybody else.
I become a bunch of self-limiting beliefs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which has no good outcome for me. Again, nothing to do with the person that hurt me.
Yeah.
It has everything to do with me. And I don't think people really understand that when you stay angry, that's a choice. It's again this justifiable need to be mad, because if I'm not mad anymore, then it means it was okay. It means that it didn't really happen as profoundly as it did. And that's nothing, that is not what we're talking about here.
Yes. And one of the last things that's important is you can't forgive. Well, sometimes let's say two things. You can't forgive or let go when you don't approach the person or set boundaries. That's your responsibility. But also, what if you don't have the opportunity because the person is abusive and you know it won't go well, or they've passed? You can write a letter. You can do certain things, and counselors can give feedback on that, but you can write a letter as if you were going to give it to them and burn it later, or do something as a way for you to actually feel like you have some type of closure, you know? And I feel like closure isn't always 100% possible with the person, but closure is possible within
me.
us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you can't, what I love about the book is it talks about, in addition to the fourfold path to forgiveness, at the end of each one of the chapters, there's a stone ritual, there's a journal exercise, and there's a meditation exercise, all incorporating that chapter of the book. And it really, really walks you through the very things you just talked about in a very practical way. And I will tell you, it's a heady book to read because it can stir up lots of different emotions. But as you process through them and be kind and loving with yourself, the benefits are so profound. I can't say that loud enough.
Yeah. All right. So we know that this podcast is longer than some of the other ones, and we're going to wrap it up. But, you know, this is not that light subject that you can just throw to the corner and get to everything that's really important. We want it to be there for you as a resource to help you forgive, to help you work through things, to help you continue to have those good boundaries. If you did not see the Boundary podcast, I do encourage you to listen to that as well. People found it very impactful. And I can't thank you enough. You know, you're such a wonderful person. And I don't know what would be the correct word, but an asset to everybody around you. You know, like being in the work you are, you have a way of just cutting through to things and getting to the center of it. And that is so effective, you know.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much,
It's
Teresa.
so good to spend time with you.
Yeah.
Before we say goodbye, can you just say the name of the book one more
Sure.
time for everybody?
The name of the book is The Book of Forgiving. And it's written by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and it's Tutu is his last name. And you can find it on Amazon.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So just remember to speak life into yourself and others. We hope this helps set you free and is just a good resource for you. And thanks so much for listening. Have a beautiful and blessed day. Take care.